A struggling nurse married a dying widower in the hospital, unaware he was a billionaire hospital owner. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's dive into today's story. This is a tale of love, secrets, and second chances, set in the most unexpected of places, a hospital room. Meet Emily, a young nurse who's been struggling to make ends meet ever since her father passed away, leaving her with nothing but debts to pay. Emily has always been a hard worker, balancing her full-time job at the hospital and taking care of her mother who is battling cancer. Her life hasn't been easy, but she's a fighter. Every day, she hopes for a breakthrough, something that would make her life easier, or at least bring some relief. She spends long hours caring for patients, but one particular evening, things are about to take an unexpected turn. Emily is assigned to care for a patient named Mr. William, a widower who's been in a coma for several months after a car accident. He's a man of few words and little family, except for a few distant relatives who come and go. Most of the hospital staff have written him off, believing he might never wake up. But Emily isn't like the others. She takes her job seriously, offering kindness to every patient she encounters, no matter their circumstances. She doesn't know it yet, but this seemingly routine case will soon change her life forever. As Emily goes about her shift, adjusting IVs and checking on Mr. William, she can't help but feel an odd sense of connection to him. She talks to him as she works, telling him about her day, her dreams of a better future, and how much she misses her dad. What she doesn't know is that, despite being unconscious, William can hear everything. He's aware of her presence, and her voice is the only comfort he's felt in months. Emily doesn't expect anything in return. She's just doing her job, hoping for nothing more than a simple thank you. But little does she know, she's unknowingly become the emotional anchor for a man who has everything yet has lost everything too. Late one evening, as Emily sits by his bedside, something miraculous happens. William's hand twitches. It's a small, almost imperceptible movement, but it's enough to catch Emily's attention. Her heart races as she leans closer, her breath catching in her throat. Could it be? After months of being in a coma, could William finally be waking up? She reaches for his hand, holding it gently in hers, as she whispers his name. There's a moment of silence. Then, in the softest of voices, he speaks, "Thank you for being here." The words are barely a whisper, but they're enough to make Emily's heart skip a beat. She's shocked, unsure of what to do. She rushes out of the room to find a doctor, but when she returns, something feels different. William's eyes are open, and he's looking directly at her. This is the moment when everything changes. Emily has just begun to realize that this simple, quiet man, whom she thought was just another patient, is far more than she could have ever imagined. Emily rushed back into the room, her heart pounding in her chest. She could hardly believe what had just happened. William, the man who had been unconscious for months, was now awake. His eyes were open, and there was a flicker of recognition in them as they locked onto hers. He weakly squeezed her hand, as if reassuring her that he was really there, and for the first time in months, he spoke again, his voice barely above a whisper. "I can't hear you." Emily stood frozen for a moment, unable to believe what she was witnessing. The quiet, lifeless man who had been nothing more than a shell of his former self was now alive, awake, and holding her hand. A rush of emotions flooded her, from relief to awe, but she quickly shook herself back into reality. She needed to get a doctor. She rushed out of the room, calling for help. The next few minutes felt like hours as doctors and nurses flooded into the room, surrounding William. Emily stood off to the side, watching as they checked his vitals, tested his reflexes, and carefully monitored his every movement. It was a whirlwind of activity, but all Emily could focus on was the look in William's eyes. He was awake. He was here, and somehow, she had played a part in it. It wasn't long before Emily found herself alone with William again. The doctors had left to run more tests, and Emily stayed by his side, watching over him. He was still weak, his body frail from the months of immobility, but there was a spark in him now that wasn't there before. "How are you feeling?" Emily asked gently, her voice soft. William turned his head slightly to face her, his eyes filled with gratitude. Better, he said quietly. Thank you for being here. I never thought I'd wake up. Emily smiled softly, her heart swelling at his words. She didn't know why, but something about this man, this patient, had drawn her in from the moment she first laid eyes on him. She had no idea who he really was, only that he was in need of care and compassion. But as the days went on, Emily began to notice something strange. William's recovery seemed to be moving at an unusually fast pace. His strength was returning, his mind sharp as ever, and he even began to talk more. There was something different about him, though, something that made Emily feel both curious and cautious. One evening, after his physical therapy session, Emily was sitting with him in his room, helping him adjust his blankets. William looked at her, his expression more serious than she had ever seen it. You don't know who I am, do you? He asked, his voice low. Emily blinked in confusion. I know your name is William. You're recovering from an accident, she said, unsure of where this conversation was going. William gave a small, wry smile. I'm not just any man, he said softly. I own this hospital. I'm the CEO of Carter Healthcare. Emily froze, her eyes widening in disbelief. She had been caring for a man who owned the very hospital where she worked. She felt a mix of shock and guilt wash over her. Why didn't you tell me? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. William sighed, leaning back against his pillows. I wanted to know if someone would care for me, not my money. I didn't want anyone to treat me differently because of who I am. Emily's mind was racing. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. She had been treating this man like just another patient, never knowing the truth about his wealth and status. And yet, despite everything, they had formed a connection, a bond that felt real. But why me? She asked, her voice trembling. Why did you choose me? William met her gaze, his eyes sincere. Because you saw me, not the man with money. You saw the person who needed help. And you were the only one who treated me like I mattered. Emily's heart ached. She didn't know what to say. She had never expected anything like this to happen. She had only been doing her job, caring for a man who needed help. But now, the lines between patient and caregiver were blurred. Her feelings for him had grown over the past few weeks, and she wasn't sure how to handle the truth. William watched her closely, as if waiting for her to process what he had just revealed. Emily took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment settle in. She had come to know this man, not as a billionaire CEO, but as someone who had been broken by grief, lost in his own pain. And somehow, she had become a part of his healing. She didn't know what the future held, but one thing was certain. Her life would never be the same again. The days following William's revelation were filled with a mixture of disbelief and curiosity for Emily. She had spent the past several weeks caring for him, but now everything had changed. The man she thought was just another patient, a widower with little to his name, was in fact the CEO of Carter Healthcare, the very hospital she worked for. Emily had always believed in the power of kindness and compassion, yet she never expected that her simple actions would lead her to a man like William. And now that she knew who he truly was, she found herself at a crossroads. She couldn't deny that her feelings for him had deepened, but could she continue to care for him without seeing the billionaire behind the patient? Was it possible to separate the man from his wealth and status? The internal struggle weighed heavily on her. William, however, seemed determined to show her that their connection was not based on his money or power. He had shared his personal struggles. With her, his fears, his pain of losing his wife, and the loneliness that had followed. Emily could see the vulnerability behind the CEO facade, and it made her question everything she thought she knew about him. One afternoon, as she sat beside his bed, checking his vitals and adjusting the 4-drip, William spoke again, his voice softer than usual. Emily, I need to ask you something, he said, his eyes meeting hers with a look of quiet sincerity. What do you see when you look at me? Emily paused, the question catching her off guard. She had never thought about it in those terms before. She had cared for him as a nurse, as a person in need, not as a rich CEO or a man of power. But now, with his identity revealed, how did she truly see him? She thought for a moment before responding. I see someone who is hurting, she said slowly, choosing her words carefully. Someone who needs help. Someone who has lost so much, but is still here, fighting. William nodded, his expression unreadable. That's the truth I want you to see, he said quietly. Not the man who owns this hospital, not the man with the money. Just the man who needs someone to care for him. His words resonated deeply with Emily. It was exactly what she had been trying to do from the start. Care for him, without any expectations or motives. But now, she was forced to confront her own feelings. Could she continue to be just his nurse, or was there something more between them? That evening, as Emily left her shift, she found herself walking through the hospital's quiet corridors, her mind racing. She couldn't stop thinking about William and the way he had opened up to her. The connection between them was undeniable, but she wasn't sure if she was ready to take that leap. She had spent so long focusing on her responsibilities, her mother's health, and the financial struggles that came with it, that she hadn't allowed herself the space to consider her own needs and desires. She was used to being the caregiver, but could she allow herself to be cared for in return? Over the next few days, Emily continued her shifts, caring for William with the same dedication as before. But something had changed. She couldn't ignore the way he looked at her, the way his touch lingered just a little longer than necessary when they held hands. The emotional bond they shared was undeniable, and as she sat by his side one evening, she realized that she could no longer deny the feelings that had blossomed between them. William was not just her patient anymore. He had become someone she deeply cared about, someone she wanted to be there for, no matter what. And maybe, just maybe, he felt the same way about her. Emily couldn't shake the feeling that everything was about to change. She had spent the last few weeks caring for William, tending to his needs with the same dedication she had always put into her work. But now, everything felt different. Her feelings for him had deepened in ways she hadn't anticipated, and she found herself questioning everything she thought she knew about herself and her career. The next day, as she entered his room, the atmosphere was different. William had made significant progress in his recovery. He was no longer the frail man who had first opened his eyes a few weeks ago. His strength was returning, and he was more alert than ever before. Emily walked in to find him sitting up in bed, a small smile on his face as he greeted her. "Good morning, Emily," he said, his voice steady and full of life. "I've been thinking about what you said the other day." Emily's heart skipped a beat. He had been thinking about their conversation, the one where he had asked her how she saw him. She had shared her feelings about caring for him, how much it meant to her, and how their connection had grown over time. "What do you mean?" she asked, trying to hide the nerves creeping up on her. William looked at her with an intensity that made her stomach flutter. "I've been thinking about how much you've done for me, how much you've cared," he said softly. "And I want to do something for you in return." Emily's breath caught in her throat. She wasn't sure what to expect, but this was not it. "You've already done so much for me," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. William shook his head. "No, I mean something more. You've changed my life, Emily, and I want to show you that I'm not just a patient, not just a man with money and power. I want to be someone who's worthy of your kindness." Emily was speechless. She didn't know what to say. The man who had been a stranger to her only a short time ago, the man who had been lying in a coma, was now sitting up in front of her, offering her something she hadn't expected, his heart. For a moment, they simply stared at each other, the silence thick with emotion. "I don't know what you're saying," Emily said, her voice trembling. "But I care about you, William. More than I should, more than I ever expected." William smiled, a soft, warm smile that made her heart skip a beat. "Then let me prove to you that I care too." It was in that moment that Emily realized just how deep their bond had become. She had spent weeks caring for him, not expecting anything in return, but now, she saw him for who he truly was. Not just a patient or a billionaire, but a man who was capable of love, capable of offering her a future. That evening, as Emily left her shift, her mind was racing. She couldn't stop thinking about what William had said. Could she really open her heart to him? Could she let go of the doubts and fears that had held her back? She didn't know the answers, but she knew one thing for sure. She couldn't keep pretending that what she felt for him was just a professional connection. She was falling for him, and it scared her. But she couldn't ignore it any longer. The next day, when she walked into his room, she found him sitting by the window, looking out at the city skyline. "Emily," he said, turning to face her. "I've been thinking about us. About what happens next." Emily's heart pounded in her chest. She had been waiting for this moment, but now that it was here, she wasn't sure if she was ready. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice steady despite the nerves that were threatening to overwhelm her. William stood up slowly, taking a step toward her. I want to be with you, Emily. I want to give you a life, a future, together. His words hung in the air, and Emily felt as though everything had shifted in an instant. She had never imagined this would happen. Never thought that she, a simple nurse, could be the one to capture the heart of a man like William. But now, in this moment, she realized that anything was possible. And for the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to believe that love, real love, was within her reach. Emily's heart raced as she stood in front of William, the weight of his words still hanging in the air. She had never imagined herself in this position, standing in front of the very man she had cared for so deeply, a man who had opened up to her in ways she never expected. His confession had shifted something inside her. She had spent so long focusing on her duties, her mother's illness, and the challenges of her daily life. But now, for the first time in a long while, Emily was forced to confront her own feelings. She had already fallen for him, but could she take the leap? Could she truly build a life with him? Someone who had everything she had ever dreamed of, yet remained humble in a way she had never experienced? William looked at her with those soft, searching eyes, waiting for her response. She didn't know what to say, but she knew she couldn't let the moment slip away. I want to be with you too, she said quietly, her voice trembling. But it's not just about us. It's about everything else, my family, my life. I don't know how I fit into your world. William stepped closer, his gaze unwavering. You already fit, he said, his voice low and reassuring. You've been here for me when no one else has. You've seen me, Emily, not just as the CEO, not just as a man with wealth, but as someone who's broken and in need of help. And that's what matters to me. I want you, all of you. Emily took a deep breath, her emotions swirling. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe that their connection was real, that it wasn't just some fantasy born out of circumstance. But there were still so many questions, so many doubts. Could she truly be with someone like him? Someone who had the world at his feet? Could she trust him not to see her as just another person in his orbit? Someone who was there for convenience and not for love? William seemed to sense her hesitation. I know it's a lot, he said softly, but I'm not asking for everything all at once. I'm asking for a chance to show you what we could have. No pressure, just a chance. Emily's heart softened as she looked at him. She had always believed in the power of love, in the idea that two people could build something meaningful, no matter their differences. She had already seen the way he cared for her, the way he had put his heart on the line, and in that moment, she knew she couldn't turn away. Okay, she whispered, a smile tugging at her lips. I'm willing to see where this goes. The tension in the room seemed to melt away as William's face broke into a smile. Thank you, he said, his voice full of relief and gratitude. I promise you, Emily, I won't let you down. As the days passed, Emily and William began to navigate their new relationship, carefully at first, but with a growing sense of trust. They spent time together outside of the hospital, going on quiet walks, sharing stories, and slowly letting their walls down. For the first time in a long time, Emily felt like she was living her life for herself, not just for her responsibilities. She allowed herself to believe in the possibility of happiness, of love, of something more than what she had ever imagined. But just as things seemed to be falling into place, Emily's past came rushing back. Her mother's health had taken a turn for the worse, and Emily found herself torn between her commitment to William and the responsibilities she had back home. She couldn't ignore her family, but she also didn't want to lose the connection she had with William. One evening, as she sat beside her mother's hospital bed, Emily felt a wave of guilt wash over her. She had promised herself that she wouldn't lose sight of her family, but the love and support she had found with William made it hard to balance everything. That night, she called him, her voice breaking as she explained the situation. I don't know how to do this, she admitted. I want to be with you, but I can't ignore my mom. She needs me. William's response was immediate, his voice calm and understanding. I know, Emily. Family comes first. I'll be here when you're ready. You don't have to choose between us. Take the time you need. His words gave her the space she needed, the reassurance that she didn't have to sacrifice one part of her life for the other. And in that moment, Emily realized that no matter how complicated life got, she could navigate it with him by her side. Emily spent the next few weeks trying to balance her responsibilities. She continued to care for her mother, but something had shifted within her. She was no longer just the caregiver. She was learning to accept the love and support that William was offering her. Every day, she grew more comfortable with the idea of being with him, even though it was complicated. Her mother's health was declining, and it left Emily torn between two worlds. On one hand, there was William, a man who had brought joy and warmth into her life. On the other hand, there was her family, who needed her more than ever. As she sat by her mother's bedside late one evening, she couldn't help but feel overwhelmed. Her mother had always been her anchor, the one person who believed in her no matter what. Now, as her mother slept peacefully, Emily's thoughts wandered back to William. He had shown her what it meant to be loved and cherished, and she was beginning to understand that love wasn't something she had to fight for. It was something that could be shared, and she didn't have to choose between him and her family. The following day, Emily called William. Her voice was soft, but there was a sense of resolve behind it. "I've made my decision," she said quietly. "I want to be with you, but I also need to be here for my mom. I don't want you to feel like I'm not committed to us." William's voice was steady and understanding. "Emily, I've never asked you to choose between us. I know how important your family is to you. I'll always be here, supporting you through everything. You don't have to sacrifice your family for us." Emily smiled softly, feeling the weight lift from her shoulders. She had worried that her love for William would tear her apart, but instead, it had given her the strength to care for her family and herself. That night, she sat with her mother and held her hand, reflecting on the journey she had taken. A few months ago, she had never imagined this life. But now, she could see a future with both love and family, each part of her life blending together in a way she never thought possible. As her mother's condition stabilized, Emily was able to spend more time with William. They took long walks in the park, enjoyed quiet dinners at his penthouse, and shared their hopes and dreams. Emily realized that this wasn't just about love, it was about building something real, something lasting. One evening, as they sat on the balcony, watching the sun set over the city, William took her hand in his. "Emily, I know we've been through a lot, but I want you to know that I'm here for you, no matter what. I want to build a future together. Not just with you, but with your family, too." Emily's heart swelled. She had been afraid of the unknown, afraid that her life would never change. But now, sitting next to the man she loved, she realized that change was exactly what she needed. "I want that too, William," she said softly. "I want to build a life with you, one that we can share together with both our families. No more secrets, no more fears." William leaned in and kissed her forehead gently. "Then we'll do it, Emily. We'll build a future together." As the months passed, Emily's life became a blend of love, family, and new beginnings. She learned to let go of the past and embrace the future with William by her side. And though there were challenges ahead, she knew that she didn't have to face them alone. Together, they would create a new chapter, one that would be filled with love, healing, and the joy of family. Emily's heart, once so heavy with worry and responsibility, now felt lighter than ever before. She had found her place in the world, not as a caregiver, but as someone who was loved and cherished. And for the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to believe in the future, a future that was filled with hope and possibility. As Emily and William continued to build their life together, they faced a new challenge, one that neither of them had anticipated. While they had been able to find their rhythm in the quiet moments, they couldn't ignore the weight of William's family legacy. His company, Carter Healthcare, was under pressure from competitors, and it seemed that every time they started to breathe easy, there was a new crisis to navigate. Emily had tried to stay out of the business side of things, focusing instead on her role as William's partner, but it became increasingly difficult as the demands of the company grew. One evening, after a particularly long day at the hospital, Emily arrived at William's penthouse to find him pacing the living room, his face tense. "William," she called softly, setting her things down. He turned to face her, his expression strained. "Emily, we need to talk," he said, his voice heavy. "There's something happening at work that I can't ignore anymore." Emily immediately felt her chest tighten. She had seen this side of William before, the weight of his responsibilities pressing down on him. "What's going on?" she asked, walking toward him. "The board is trying to take control," he said, running a hand through his hair. "They want to sell off parts of the hospital. They want to turn it into a profit-driven machine, and I can't let that happen." Emily's heart sank. She had seen how hard William had worked to create a place of healing, a sanctuary for both patients and staff. The idea of it being sold, turned into something cold and impersonal, was unthinkable. "What can we do?" she asked, her voice full of concern. "I don't know," William replied, his eyes tired. "I've tried everything. I thought I could handle this on my own, but it's becoming too much." Emily placed a hand on his arm, her gaze soft but firm. "You don't have to do this alone, William. We're in this together. You've built something meaningful, and we can't let it slip away. Let me help." William looked at her, his expression softening for the first time that night. "I don't want to drag you into this," he said, his voice full of hesitation. "This is my mess to clean up." Emily shook her head. "It's not just your mess. It's our future, and I'm not going to let you carry it all by yourself." The weight of the moment seemed to settle between them, but in that instant, Emily knew that this was more than just a business decision. This was about their values, their vision for the future, and the legacy they wanted to leave behind. "Together," she said, her voice steady. "We'll find a way." Over the next few weeks, Emily became more involved in the business side of things. She helped William navigate through meetings with the board, offering her insights and perspective, even though it was a world she wasn't used to. She watched as William fought with everything he had, trying to protect the very thing he had worked so hard to build. It wasn't easy, and there were moments of doubt, but with Emily by his side, William found a new sense of determination. One afternoon, after a particularly grueling meeting, William sat on the balcony of their penthouse, looking out at the city skyline. Emily joined him, sitting beside him quietly for a moment. "I think we've done it," William said, his voice quiet but full of relief. "The board has agreed to keep the hospital independent. We've got more time to figure out the next steps, but for now, it's ours." Emily smiled, feeling the tension in her chest ease. "I knew you could do it," she said softly, resting her head on his shoulder. William wrapped an arm around her, pulling her close. "We did it," he corrected her. "Together." As they sat in silence, watching the sunset, Emily felt a deep sense of gratitude wash over her. They had come so far, and though the road ahead would not always be easy, she knew that with William by her side, they could face anything. She had found her place in the world, not just as a nurse, but as a partner, as someone who had the strength to help guide them through whatever challenges came their way. And as the world outside continued to change, she realized that, in this moment, she had everything she ever needed: love, family, and the promise of a future they would build together. As the weeks passed, Emily and William settled into a new rhythm. The pressure of the hospital's future had eased, but new challenges were on the horizon. While their bond had only deepened, Emily was still adjusting to the idea of sharing her life with a man who had a world of responsibilities beyond their relationship. William's commitment to the hospital and its staff was admirable, but it also meant he had to be away from home often, attending board meetings, overseeing hospital projects, and dealing with the daily demands of his business. Emily respected his dedication, but there were days when she found herself longing for more of his time, for moments where they could just be together. One evening, as they sat on the couch, William looked at her with a gentle smile. "I know I've been busy," he began, his voice full of understanding. "And I know I haven't been around as much as I should. But I want you to know that you mean the world to me, Emily. And I don't want to take you for granted." Emily reached for his hand, squeezing it softly. "I understand, William. You've got a lot on your plate, but I want you to know, I'm here for you. I always will be." There was a pause as William looked at her, his expression serious. "I don't want to lose what we have," he said, his voice full of sincerity. "I know I've been caught up in work, but you're my priority. I just need to figure out a way to balance everything." Emily's heart warmed at his words. She had always known that William had a lot to manage, but hearing him admit it made her feel even more connected to him. She leaned in and kissed him gently. "We'll figure it out together," she whispered. Over the next few days, William took steps to re-establish a better balance. He began delegating more tasks to his trusted team members at Carter Healthcare, and he made sure to carve out time for Emily. They went for long walks in the park, had dinner at their favorite restaurants, and spent quiet evenings at home, simply enjoying each other's company. For the first time in a while, Emily felt like she wasn't just an afterthought in William's busy life. She was an active part of it, and he was making it a priority to show her just how much she mattered. But as they found their balance, they were confronted by a new challenge. William's ex-wife, Sarah, unexpectedly returned to town. Emily had known about Sarah, but she had never met her. William had always been careful to keep their past separate from their present, but now Sarah's return seemed to stir up old emotions. One afternoon, William sat down with Emily, his face tense. "Sarah's back," he said quietly. Emily's heart skipped a beat. She had never been worried about Sarah before, but the way William spoke made her feel uneasy. "What does that mean?" she asked, her voice steady but with an underlying hint of concern. William sighed, running a hand through his hair. "It's complicated. She wants to talk. There are things we need to discuss." Emily nodded, trying to keep her composure. "Are you worried?" she asked, her voice soft. William met her gaze, his eyes filled with vulnerability. "No," he said firmly. "I'm not worried. But I need you to trust me. I'm committed to you, Emily. I always have been. And I want you to know that nothing is going to change that." Emily took a deep breath. She had always trusted William, and she knew that this was just another test of their relationship. She reached out and took his hand. "I trust you," she said, her voice full of conviction. "We'll face this together, just like we always have." The next day, William met with Sarah. Emily stayed home, her mind racing as she tried to keep herself busy. She couldn't help but feel a little insecure, wondering what kind of conversation William and his ex-wife would have. She knew he cared for her, but she couldn't deny the emotions that surfaced whenever Sarah was mentioned. Hours passed, and William finally returned home, looking more relieved than when he had left. Emily stood up from the couch, her heart pounding. "How did it go?" she asked, her voice hesitant. William smiled warmly at her, walking toward her and pulling her into an embrace. "It's over," he said softly. "We talked, and I made it clear that my future is with you, Emily. There's nothing to worry about." Emily closed her eyes, letting out a sigh of relief. She knew William's words were true. She had always been his priority, and this was just another chapter in their story. As they stood there, holding each other, Emily realized how far they had come. They had faced their fair share of challenges, but through it all, they had grown stronger together. And in that moment, she knew that no matter what came next, they would continue to face it together, side by side. As the months went by, Emily and William continued to grow together, their bond deepening with each passing day. The challenges they faced only strengthened their commitment to one another, and their love for each other blossomed in ways they hadn't expected. William's work at Carter Healthcare was no longer just a burden to bear alone. Emily had become a strong support for him, not just in personal matters, but also in the direction he wanted to take with the hospital. Together, they built a vision of what the future of Carter Healthcare should be, a place of healing, compassion, and care for all, not driven by profit, but by a genuine desire to make a difference in people's lives. They worked side by side, strategizing ways to make the hospital more inclusive, more community-focused, and sustainable. Emily found herself thriving in this new role, not as just a nurse, but as someone who helped shape the future of the place she had cared for so long. Yet, despite the busy work and constant demands, they never lost sight of their relationship. Every evening, after the hectic days, they would steal moments to just be with each other, whether it was cooking dinner together, taking quiet walks around the neighborhood, or just sitting on the balcony, talking about their hopes and dreams for the future. Life, they realized, was about balance. And with that balance came peace. One evening, as they were preparing for a quiet dinner, William turned to Emily, his expression soft and full of affection. "I've been thinking," he began, his voice a little more serious than usual. Emily glanced up, sensing the weight of the moment. "About what?" she asked, setting down the pan she had been stirring. William took a deep breath, walking toward her. "I know we've had our fair share of challenges," he said, taking her hand in his. "But every step of the way, I've realized something important, something I should have known all along." Emily's heart fluttered in her chest, her gaze never leaving his. "What's that?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. "That you are the most important person in my life," William said, his voice steady, filled with sincerity. "You've been my anchor, Emily. You've helped me find purpose again. And now, more than ever, I want to build a life with you. A life where we can be happy, where we can grow together, and where I can give you everything you deserve." Emily felt her breath catch in her throat. She had always known that William loved her, but hearing him express it so openly, so deeply, made her heart swell with emotion. "I don't need anything more than what we have," she said softly, her fingers gently tracing the back of his hand. "Just you. That's all I ever wanted." William smiled, his eyes full of love. "Then we'll make it happen," he promised. Together. A few weeks later, they stood together in the hospital's main lobby, surrounded by family, friends, and colleagues. The hospital had grown into something they could both be proud of. And now, as they looked ahead, it felt like the right time to take the next step in their relationship. William turned to Emily, taking her hand in his as they walked toward the center of the room, where their loved ones were gathered. "Emily, there's something I've been waiting to do," he said, his voice calm, yet filled with emotion. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, velvet box, opening it to reveal a delicate diamond ring. "I want to spend the rest of my life with you," he said softly. "Will you marry me?" Emily's heart raced as she looked at the ring, her eyes filled with tears. She never thought she would find someone who would truly understand her, someone who would stand by her through everything. And now, standing in front of her, was the man who had shown her what love, trust, and partnership really meant. She smiled through her tears and nodded, her voice trembling as she whispered, "Yes. Yes, I will." The room erupted in applause as William slipped the ring onto her finger, their hands entwined, their hearts forever connected. As they embraced, Emily realized that all the struggles, all the heartache, had led her to this moment, the moment where everything fell into place. With William by her side, she knew they could face anything life threw at them. They had built a future, together, and that future was filled with love, hope, and endless possibilities.